Vangelis, the former head of the NAACP, says he's going to endorse Bernie Sanders. The endorsement's a potential boost for crazy Bernie, who has struggled to gain traction among African-American voters, though he has made small gains on Hillary Clinton. He's way ahead in New Hampshire, but after that, he's nowhere, right? Crazy Bernie owns New Hampshire, at least right now, looks like it. But you get out of New Hampshire, move on down the campaign trail, and Bernie Sanders he's with the chuckwag, sayonara, right? Not there. Well, yeah, for now, I know. Well, I tell you, I was right about Hillary. I knew this was going to happen. She's having all kinds of trouble with women in this campaign, and specifically young women, the millennial women, and it was exactly as I forecast. And admittedly, this is not a tough prediction to make, but these young women of millennial age who have been raised on the fact that everybody's out to rape them on campus and that men are predators and society doesn't care. When they see what Mrs. Clinton's role was in supporting her husband, the sexual predator, and when they find out what her role was in destroying the women who came forth with allegations that her husband was mistreating them, they're not going to put up with it. They don't have any rock star connection to Clintons. They don't go back to the 90s and think the Clintons are the end all of American politics or America. They're not going to like, and they don't. Am I the only one that predicted that? No, come on. There have to be others have seen that. But Snerdley says, I don't know why I'm the only one that predicted. It was flat out easy to spot. All you have to do is examine the rape culture as it on campus today and the general state of feminism today. And then you realize that when these women in the 90s were either not even born or not old enough to have any memory whatsoever, so they weren't affected by the national love affair that the media had with the Clintons and all this. I mean, there's no connection to them in that regard. And there's nothing in the current culture. There's nothing worse than a woman whose role is to make it easier for men to behave in their predatory ways. She was an enabler. She was an enabler of her husband. She knew that she was being cheated on. She's the most cheated on woman in America. These young women, and this is not something that they're going to end up respecting, and they don't. There was a point in this thing last night that I thought was really telling about Hillary Clinton, and it's one of the reasons why I think she can be beaten in a general election. And I first started pointing it out during her book tour. I still can't believe she got $14 million. I can believe it. I know how these people establish them. This $650,000 to do a speech for Goldman Sachs. Now, let me explain the connection to you. Goldman Sachs, former CEO there, one of many, is a guy named Robert Rubin. Robert Rubin happened to be the Treasury Secretary during the Clinton administration, the first term of it. And that's all you need to know. All of these former CEOs at Goldman Sachs are a club. You got Lloyd Blankfein, you've got John Corzine, you got Rubin. I mean, they're all a club, and they all exist to perpetuate what their predecessors were doing. So the Clintons know Bob Rubin. They added to his resume by making him Treasury Secretary. He was able to parlay that going back to Citibank after he left the Clinton regime when Citibank was in big trouble, and it didn't help. He was not able to save it. He did not add to his resume, but it didn't matter. The resume had already been etched in stone, so at that level, people don't fail. And when they do in the Democrat side, they fail up. It's amazing. Like Jimmy Carter, the worst president ever, and he's one of the big stars of the Democrat Party these days. You really do fail up in that party. They herald their failures. They put them at the top of the totem pole. So anyway, there's the connection. So Goldman Sachs wants Hillary to come make a speech. They don't want to hear Hillary make a speech. That's not what this is. They want to figure out how to get $650,000 to her. Campaign donations, that's tough. Limits, reporting. And all. Hey, I got it. Let's have her come give a speech. So they have her come give a speech. Nobody pays attention to it doesn't matter what she says. She could come show up for 10 minutes, talk about knitting. It doesn't matter. The whole thing was nothing more than a ruse for them to be able to give her $650,000 because that's what happens in the establishment. That's how they take care of each other and scratch each other's backs and how they make sure each other stay rich. And Goldman Sachs was just one of many funneling money to Bill and or Hillary Clinton in this manner. So anyway, the question was brought up last night. Like Anderson Cooper said, $650,000 to do a speech? And explain that. And Hillary looked at the audience and kind of shrugged her shoulders. Well, that's what they offered. That's not what they offered. That's not how nobody's going to offer her $650,000 to hear her come. She will put you to sleep. She's a screeching bore. There's nothing charismatic, enigmatic about Mrs. Clinton would make you want to listen to her talk. Certainly not $650,000 worth. Trump might be able to get that after all this is over, but she never could. Her book deal, $14 million, another example of how it all works inside the establishment. People want to take care of Mrs. Clinton because she's going to remain in power. So here comes the publisher. Here's $14 million. Please remember us, Mrs. Clinton, when you become president. So forth and so on. She didn't sell any books. Time for the book tour. Nobody shows up. She couldn't draw a crowd. And the reason is she doesn't have any readers. She doesn't have a connection with her audience. Like Jeb Bush. You see this just begging people in the audience to applaud? Begging people to clap. Could you please clap? Because there isn't a connection. I'm not mentioning this as criticism of anybody. It's just the way it is. Whatever you want to say about Trump, he has this connection with his supporters. There's a bond there. There is a connection. Jeb doesn't have it. Hillary doesn't have it. Any number. Lindsey Graham didn't have it. Chris Christie doesn't have it. It's rare. It's what makes performers or candidates, office holders. It's what sets them apart. You really have a connection. Bernie has it to one degree or another. Yeah, Bernie has it. There's a connection. Mrs. Clinton doesn't, and it was illustrated last night. This was, to me, stunning, and I think this is one of the reasons why I think she can be beaten. A man in the audience asked Hillary a question about end-of-life decisions. He said he had colon cancer, that it was terminal, that he was going to vote for her. And he said that he came to the town hall to ask her if she would speak broadly on the subject of terminal cancer and end-of-life decisions. And she didn't know what to do because she's not a warm, in-touch person. She doesn't know how. She's cold. She is distant. At the end of the question, she nicely thanked this guy, who was an elderly gentleman. She thanked him for his question, said she hadn't thought much about the issue, but it was really great that he was bringing it up. Now, here you had a dying man, an admitted dying man, standing right in front of a woman who says that she is and wants to be the champion of everyday Americans. This was akin to it's a little bit different, but it was kind of like the question Michael Dukakis got, but what he would do if his wife was raped. Remember that? Bernard Shaw asking, and Dukakis sat there and gave this clinical, left-wing textbook answer about protecting the rapist's rights, civil rights and legal rights, and making sure that he didn't go off the handle with emotion. And Bernard Shaw couldn't believe it. Governor Dukakis, I've just asked you a hypothetical. Your wife has been raped, and you didn't even raise an eyebrow at the prospect. You can't even get emotional. No, he had to answer it from the playbook. Well, Bernie, we must consider the rights of all involved in a circumstance like that. The rights of the accused. Of course, the accused is only the accused in our society. And I want to make sure that the accused was not denied his civil rights. People were appalled. that there wasn't one syllable of even attempted fake outrage that in the hypothetical his wife had been. Well, that's what this reminded me of. The Dukakis question was from a journalist, Bernard Shaw. And Dukakis, he didn't talk about the inhumanity of the crime that he was to imagine perpetrated on his wife. He just was a disaster. So here's a guy with terminal colon cancer, decided that he would travel to a town hall and ask Hillary Clinton a question. He's standing just feet away, several feet away. Now, most people watching this had to be filled with sadness and sympathy. The guy was reaching out. He got out of his bed to go see her. He thinks that he has such respect for her. He wanted to know. He was seeking some comfort, that what was happening to him was going to have some meaning to the country at large in the hands of Hillary Clinton as president. And Hillary Clinton, you could tell she was fumbling around, concerned that she wasn't prepared with a policy answer. She was looking for a policy answer like Dukakis was from the policy playbook. She hadn't even dreamed of a question like this. She didn't have a canned answer. She didn't display any heartfelt emotion for the guy. She didn't talk to him. She didn't empathize. She didn't ask him a single question. She didn't ask if she could speak directly to him as a human being. She didn't ask if there was anything she could do for him. She did not make a human connection with this guy who walked all this way to tell her he's dying. He's going to vote for her because he thinks that what's happened to him is happening to a lot of people, and she can take his experience and make something of it and help other people. And Hillary is sitting there trying to conjure up a policy-related answer. She didn't ask him any questions about his family. She didn't ask him what his life was like. She didn't ask him how he was dealing with it. Now, she wasn't mean. I'm not saying she was Nurse Ratched here. She just didn't know how to handle a stranger sharing his personal tragedy with her. She was clueless, folks. She hadn't the slightest, I think it illustrated the phony, baloney, plastic banana, good time rock and roller hype that liberalism itself is. Liberalism supposedly is where all of this compassion is. And where all of the understanding and the big-hearted love and so on. She was clueless. She hadn't the slightest idea. You could tell she was worried if she didn't come up with the right policy answer, it would hurt her. That was stunning to me.